thank you so much for coming back and joining us for round 2 of our welcome session. We're super excited to be able to go into some more depth about our OIC history and then the SOAR model specifically here with Jonathan and Mike. So without further ado, Jonathan Krigger, take us away.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know everyone has a bunch on their plate, both professionally and mentally, so I want to provide thanks for that, and thank you all for joining. We're going to be talking quickly about the OIC history, and then Mike's going to take it away and talk about the SOAR model. We're going to try to get you out of here on time today and respect that time. So first and foremost, I want to thank everybody and welcome you to the OIC family. It's important to know where we're going, to look back to where we've come from. And we've mentioned this a lot in the morning session, this OIC family idea. Some of you all are familiar with it. Some of you all have just joined us for the first time. So when we talk about this, we really mean a community of practice, a culture of care, and a supportive camaraderie-ship that we're moving forward with this work with. And we've been doing this since the Civil Rights Movement, and it's a rather a prescient legacy that we find ourselves in with everything going on today. So as Kaya and our CEO, Mr. James Hain mentioned, we want to make space for you all to take the time to really do the caretaking that you need. If you need to get up and walk around during this, if you need a good glass of water or help a child with some virtual learning, feel free and come back. We know that everyone is juggling a lot right now. And part of what we really want to convey is to lean on us and lean on your fellow team members, because we a team, those on the SOAR grant and also those across the OIC network. We are all here moving towards the same mission and purpose together. And while we might only see the folks who walk through our doors on a daily basis or virtually meeting with us, we also have connections, and not just all over the country, but all over the world. So with that, thank you and welcome. OIC's goal has always been to help the economically disadvantaged and unemployed people of all races and backgrounds and give them the opportunity to break the cycle of poverty. But what that means is we are focused very intently on consolidating economic power. When we say that, we know that OIC, as I mentioned, came from the Civil Rights era, and while there was a lot of marching with Martin Luther King, there was a lot of marching with Malcolm X, there was a lot of political awareness and social awareness, there was a lot of economic awareness too. And that's really the role that OIC and our founder, which I'll talk about a little later, Dr. Reverend Sullivan, really shown. Because while there are a host of challenges that are affecting our specific populations, communities, folks still at the end of the day need to be able to pay their bills. They still need to be able to afford food. They still need to be able to provide for their family. And that's the legacy that we have tried to carry forward in this day and age of OIC. If you ask some of the folks who have been here for a long, long time, I know Jeff Woodyard has worked with Reverend Sullivan. So if I mess up anything, I invite Jeff to jump on either in chat or online and just correct me and set the record straight. And Gail as well, please let me know. But you see a lot of generational awareness about OIC. It's folks' families and their grandmothers and their cousins and their aunts who have been giving opportunities through OIC and started their careers and had a sense of community to come together through the OIC program. And that has matriculated through a number of the different initiatives that OIC has done. Much like our beginnings, we still maintain a similar model, which is we do our online outreach, we do our intake, we do our counseling. This is really the person-to-person model, and this has the roots in the very foundations of OIC. OIC came out of the, even before it was a twinkle of an idea in someone's eye, it was a collection of folks who realized that they were not getting the same opportunities to apply and advance in the jobs which would really help them sustain a living wage, would really help them take their careers and their families to a place where they could reach that level of happiness. And the church was a large gathering place for folks to come together in the Civil Rights Movement, and it's no exception for OIC and Reverend Sullivan. The collection of 400 ministers came together And they got their various organizations together, their community, and they started a selective patronage campaign. We'll get into that a little bit later. The program itself also had a series of feeder programs, which is most like the pilot for what our programs are today. They built up the soft skills, they built up the education, they built up the job readiness, and really provided the foundation for folks to be able to go into jobs, hold jobs, and set an example for the business community that folks coming through OIC, folks coming through communities who have been grappling with poverty generationally, really can churn out the best of the best and are worth giving a second look to, because way too often we find that our communities are pushed to the side. No matter what community we're speaking about, no matter what community we directly work with in your respective communities, whether that is the Black, Brown community, the immigrant community, and whether it is the returning population, there is a certain stigma traditionally that has followed throughout the thread of history that is the work that we really work to undo in making those connections. So along with that, we do a lot of occupational skills training, job development, and placement. And pausing on that placement piece, which I'm sure Mike will talk about as to the SOAR model, that has historically been a very, very important part of what we do as an organization. The placement not only means calling up an employer and seeing if they have any openings. It means really making that face-to-face connection so they know you and they have a sense of confidence when they hire or interview folks that we send them. We are opening doors, not just sending people job ads. So when you build out your IEBs, when you build out your organizations, when you build out your connections, it's a lot of that community organizing, collective action, civil rights, pounding the pavement type of work that we're doing to really facilitate a relationship between the business community and our participants. And of course, there's also a follow-up. So once someone goes through the program, they're not just done and dusted. We want to make sure we follow them throughout the community because they are part of our community and they are part of our OIC family. So coming back a bit to the selective patronage campaign, I mentioned briefly the 400 pastors. If anyone has any questions, feel free to throw it up in the chat. I'm on full screen, so I cannot see it, but I am sure that folks will help me out on my team as we go through that. Got it. Yes, indeed, we are family, Kate. The selective patronage campaign, 400 ministers with 400 congregations across the Northeast got together and said, look, our communities are not being put in jobs, they're not being paid a fair wage. What do we do about this? Well, Reverend Sullivan and the ministers got together and they went from business to business, from executive to executive, and said, okay, here is the average that your business employs and hires. Here is what it should be if it was representative of the population for Black and Brown people. Here are our requests and requirements. And if we do not meet the bare minimum of getting equal employment based on credentialing, then we will not patronize your business. So it's really honing in on the economic power of a community. So just because a community is plagued with poverty does not mean it doesn't have economic power. By taking that money completely out of a business, then that business will suffer catastrophic loss. So we don't so much call it a boycott as a selective patronage. We still buy and purchase and leverage our economic power to show the business community that we have it. But selective patronage was really going block by block to make sure that we can target specific businesses. And once they capitulate, which they did one after another. If anyone remembers the coalition of Immokalee workers from a few years ago, how they were petitioning Chipotle and Taco Bell and going from business to business to get concessions so they were paid a living wage, is much the same concept. And in this way, Reverend Sullivan was able to build allies throughout the business community while also making sure that they understood that the communities, just because they didn't have opportunities, didn't mean they were going to be put on the back burner. And with that, eventually it caught up with so much steam that we needed a central training hub. Because again, it started in the pulpit and we have to have an office space eventually, as everyone knows. So in 1964, we founded the first OIC training center and actually built out of an old jail. Use what you have. Reverend Sullivan and OIC kind of exemplified the saying that is often thrown around in activism: there are no permanent enemies and there are no permanent allies. So really being able to work with anything and with anybody to make sure that we can provide for the communities that we represent. Now, as OIC continued to grow and progress and build their foundation, they started to receive national recognition and expanded to an additional 8 cities in 1966. Today, we have 33 affiliates in 21 states. Due to a number of grants and supports and community initiatives, that number has bubbled and fluctuated over the years, but this is where we've settled on. OIC of America was established in 1971, so we can have a national hub to provide technical assistance and community replicating models for the OIC. Now, this is the early incarnation of me, Mike, Letitia, who is on leave, Kate, and Kaya. We all work with the same idea that when you have so many affiliates doing so much work, there are going to be a lot of good ideas. So part of our job is to make sure that those good ideas can get transferred from our Portland, Oregon location to our Philadelphia location to our South Florida location, and also provide that technical assistance and training to make sure that everyone has the same opportunities to thrive on the organizational level. So in the same way that our affiliates, all of your all's teams provide for the best opportunities for your participants, we try to do the same and provide the best opportunity for your organizations. To this day, we carry on with our history of DOL grants, and that really speaks to the Department of Labor really trusting our organizational pedigree to do the important work that was necessary, because when a lot of folks come out of incarceration, speaking specifically to the SOAR model, they don't have a lot of supports sometimes, and it is essential that they get not only that, but also that that starting block from which to launch their next phase of life. Reverend Sullivan himself grew up in a poor racist area, as many Black men at the time experienced a lot of discrimination. From a young age, he decided that he wasn't going to let that hold him back. And as we look around and see other people experience the same thing, he decided that he wasn't going to let that hold back anyone else either. So realizing that something needed to be done, he took a journey through his church life up to New York, back down to Philadelphia, and to really figure out how to leverage the tools and the connections he had to get to a better, to move the needle a bit. And Reverend Sullivan created a organization's ideas that really coalesce into what we have today. The picture you see here, I don't know how many folks are familiar with the Philadelphia area, but you almost have a timeline of OIC's history if you look down Broad Street. In the furthest north, you have Progress Plaza, which Reverend Sullivan opened to, again, hone in on that consolidation of economic power for the Black community. So Progress Plaza is a bit more modern today, but it still exists as a strip mall that is essential to the community area. Just a half a block down, you have our OIC of America building. Now this picture at the bottom here, that's the Leon H. Sullivan Community Center. So as I said, Reverend Sullivan lost a ton of initiatives, all aimed at providing a bulwark for the community. So we have a place to congregate, we have a place to work, to do our trainings, and to really launch ourselves up. As Reverend Sullivan was famous for saying, OIC gives a hand up, not a handout. So really consolidating the starting point from which we can build something long lasting. This is a quote from Gail, who we met in the morning. Gail said, One of the things that I personally appreciated about Reverend Sullivan was he saw her desire, her potential, and positioned her to do things within the organization and beyond. He said that he appreciated the way that she had with people and gave her special assignments that she thought she wasn't prepared for. But because of his belief in her and her own ambitions, she always did a great job. And this is the sort of encouragement that I feel we carry along in the nitty gritty work that we do, and the legacy of telling folks and meeting folks and seeing folks and not as case files, and not processing people as numbers. The biggest impacts that we hear from our frontline staff is our participants are really touched by being seen and being heard in a genuine way. We all have to go through the checklist and our case management training, but there is a certain spoken talent in building a genuine connection, having a genuine supportive relationship with folks as they work through their trauma, which is a lot of times often what we deal with, coinciding with trying to get people a job. And having someone that sees them, or at least creates space for them to exist in a genuine way, is always essential to do the work that we do. And I know I'm preaching to the choir on this one, and everyone already knows this, but I would just really hold on to this. Ivy asked in the earlier section, what do we do to stay motivated? One of the things I think is leaning in our teams and just leaning into the work you do with your participants. Yes, it's hard. Yes, you're going through things. Yes, your participants are going through things. But at the end of the day, that solidarity, at least for me personally, is that is my personal passion. That's what's carried me, making sure that I remember that I have folks in my corner and that we're going to be all right. So again, setting up the Progress Plaza, the first African-American owned and operated shopping center. This is what it was in the beginning, and this is what it looks like today. Some 10,000 people originally gathered for its opening at Broad in Oxford on Sunday, October 1968. So very, very recently, and we have gathered in the streets this last October for very different and very similar reasons as well. So the wheels of history have fully rotated, but we're still here doing the work that needs to be done. No matter what happens, I know there's a lot of stress and anxiety around the election, around police brutality, around the pandemic. But again, folks still need the invaluable work and services that our organization provides. And every day that we show up to work, every person that your team touches, that is essential to at least helping alleviate some of the burden for a person in the world and for a person in your community. Going back to the grassroots nature of Sullivan's plan, he started in the church community in that each person teaches one, each one teach one mentality. The Progress Plaza was financed by a 1036 plan where members of the Zion Baptist Church each donated 10 per month. So we aren't a big bureaucratic machine. We're a collection of people. Each of the OIC affiliate sites have always been very specific to the community that they originated in. You know your community, you know your neighbors, you know your area, you know what they need and what really fuels them. And it is by connecting on this level, that's how you're going to really see the most progress and get the most personal fulfillment out of it as well, at least in my opinion. So in the same way that it just takes a bunch of small donations from whoever can give to build up a giant shopping center that was the first of its kind in the country, that's what it takes to really make it through to whatever's coming next for us, and to not only just hit our numbers, but also just accomplish our ideals. So many of the graduates who came from OIC actually got jobs at the Progress Plaza. By 1998, OIC had trained more than 3 million people and placed more than 2.5 in jobs, with alumni collectively earning $80 billion a year. And that is in early inflation. I'm not gonna say pre-inflation because that's always been a thing, but early inflation. So that is quite a lot considering where we started from. This is our original graduating classes of OIC, and this is actually the OIC of Oklahoma in 2019, in a better, happier, more simple time where you could be within 2 feet of people and didn't have to wear face masks. So where does that bring us now? Again, I said that this happened in October of 1968, I believe, and this was October of this year. So we're still out, we're still marching, we're still dealing with a lot of the same issues. And unfortunately, we are also dealing with a lot of the same economic struggles and strife in our various communities. So we've come full circle, but we've also made a more than a few steps forward at the same time. So for every shortcoming that our participants find, they also have a single safe space in OIC, and they can leverage the SOAR program, which is extremely important and relevant when we talk about the salient issue of police brutality today. So the prison system has become a hot button topic in America. And while we're talking about the disproportionate number of communities of color and vulnerable communities who end up being churned through the prison system, we don't often talk about how to support and help and provide the foundation for folks who survive and come out of it. So that's where the SOAR program really comes in. The issues have shifted and the solution must shift as well. As you can see from the beginning, where OIC was first founded in 1964, there has been a huge spike in the federal prison population. Vulnerable communities are very similar, but the issues we face are very different as well in today's day and age. So given the high number of folks who are incarcerated in our country, the focus of building economic empowerment must address our vulnerable populations who are dealing with this on a daily basis. There's a great visualization, at least for our Pennsylvania area, the link below. Would highly recommend you checking that out. But the summation of the story is that our spending on education is constantly being pushed down, and our spending on incarceration is constantly ballooning. And because of that, we see a dramatic impact on the earning potential of affected households. We see that in the education rate, and we see that even in the foreclosure rate as those costs and effects matriculate down into our communities and neighborhoods. Mass incarceration has emerged as a pervasive crisis, and we must address it as such. As you see above, 3 out of 4 participants surveyed by the Who Pays report found that employment after release was difficult or nearly impossible. Now, politically, there have been some strides to change that with the ban the box initiatives around the country, but it still remains that if you are released, you don't really have much to your name, maybe not even a place to stay that's safe, but all the stressors, traumas, and histories that you have still remain when you return home. So without an opportunity to at least try to do something different, then there is only the familiar survival mechanisms one has to fall back on a lot of the time. And this is a lot of the work that we do in those wraparound services, support services, and working through that and providing that assistance, the holistic assistance to our participants, as well as providing the job training and the credentialing. So what's next? Mike is going to take over in a bit to talk about the SOAR program specifically, but it is incumbent upon all of us to carry that torch, which we do every day we show up in the work that we do. It might seem arduous, especially as we watch the tickers on our computers and phones roll up as folks get counted, as we wait out the pandemic. But every day you show up with your passion that you talked about in the beginning. Every day you do just that little bit, you're doing a monumental effort to maintain that legacy and to provide a different story for our participants and everyone who walks through the door, as well as for our coworkers. We not only fuel and sustain and give inspiration to our participants, but also to each other. And I don't think that we can understate that. So as folks go through the OIC program, as we fill out our quarterly reports, as we do our bi-monthly meetings, We want to make sure that we're not just being burnt out by the parade of numbers, but really holding on to what that represents. It's a history and a continuation of a civil rights struggle that we're carrying forward into a new day and a new dawn, despite how many storm clouds seem to gather overhead. It is the creation of opportunities on a massive national scale that wouldn't be possible otherwise. And even on the days we feel like giving up, just seeing folks in their caps and gowns on graduation with that light in their eyes is always more than worth it. So I thank you and I welcome you, and I'm very excited for the work that you all will do and the lives that you will touch. Thank you very much.